Dominica, one of the leading Caribbean islands in ecotourism, and today we will be talking with a family who looks at Dominica from two perspectives, one historical and one from the new generation. Stay tuned for more on Dominica, up next on CaribNation. Hello, welcome to CaribNation. I'm Derrice Deane. Today our topic is Dominica, but we're looking at Dominica from two perspectives, one historical and one from the new generation. They're two books written by two generations. Our premier guest is Gabriel Christian, Esquire. We have, at the beginning of the program, his two children, Samora and Makonnen, who have written their own book about Dominica. Samora and Makonnen, welcome to CaribNation.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have two young people who've written a book about their visit to Dominica. Let me ask you, first of all, how excited were you to go to Dominica, Samora?
Very excited. I'd never been there before, so I was really excited to finally get to go there to see everything.
Had you heard a lot about it from your parents before?
Yes, my dad would always go on business trips there, and he would come back with a lot of things like videos, so we would hear a lot before we eventually went to Dominica.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Makonnen?
I was pretty excited because like Samora said, we've never been there before.
Mm-hmm.
My parents did say a lot about that I always wanted to return to show us Dominica.
Mm-hmm.
I was excited to see new things and try new things there.
Was there any one thing you expected? What did you expect?
It wouldn't be like Maryland. We would have a lot of things that we wouldn't have in Maryland, like the food. It would be different, a lot of the foods, and mostly we wouldn't have cable TV unless we went to one of the friends and we watched their TV.
Was there any one thing you would have wanted to do, you were looking forward to, Makonnen?
Well, I was kind of looking forward to everything, actually, because I wanted to have fun on my summer vacation in Dominica.
Mm-hmm. It was just, you were just adventurous. You just wanted to try anything.
Yes.
And everything. Full of life.
I
right?
could.
I'm going to ask each of you to read a little bit of the book so that can get a taste of how you felt and how you described what you saw in Dominica and what impressions you had. And I'll start with you, Samora.
Okay. They called Dominica the most beautiful island in the world. They said it was the nature island of the Caribbean. They always wanted to have us visit there. They always wanted to return. They taught me and my younger brother Makonnen much about Dominica's culture and history. The Carib people who Christopher Columbus encountered on the island in 1493 called it Watu Kabuli, which means tall as her body. That name came about because Dominica is very mountainous. School was out and summer was here. Now it was our big travel day and time to get our backpacks ready. We had been to many places before, but never the Caribbean. We were finally going to Dominica as a family. We were on our way. We took the road to Baltimore Washington International Airport. Our neighbor, Mr. Don, drove us there. The American Airlines flight took us to San Juan, Puerto Rico. In San Juan, we took a small American Eagle plane to Dominica. As the plane tilted to land, we saw the tops of banana, coconut, and mango trees on the sides of very tall green mountains. What a view! We had arrived at our destination, Dominica. It was raining but warm. We got off the plane and saw the trees swaying in the breeze. We went into the airport terminal to get our bags. Uncle Richo was waiting for us in a green Jeep we had sent ahead. We called Uncle Richo Captain, as he was commander of the Dominican Cadet Corps. Once on board the vehicle, he took us to the cadet camp at the Marigot Secondary School. Cadets are students who volunteer to undergo leadership training to better develop the island. They looked very smart in uniform. It was fun being around young Dominicans. They spoke English as we did, but with a different accent.
What did you think about listening to people speaking English, but as you said, with a different accent? How did that impact you? How did that impress you?
The adults, when they spoke to me, mostly, it didn't really say anything to me or have
Didn't sound funny to you
at all.
Yeah.
But when I would hear kids or my friends that I would visit talk, it was so funny because in my mind, I would just expect the grown-ups to have the accent and the kids just talk normal.
like you, right?
Yeah, but it was really funny to hear them have
Kids
that
are always
accent.
amused by the accents. My kids I know thought it was very funny to hear the different accents in the Caribbean. Pass the book to McConan for me, please, and I'll ask McConan to read a section from there.
Our trip to the Carib territory was exciting. We got to meet our Carib people from whom the Caribbean takes its name. They live in a nice part of Dominica overlooking the Atlantic Ocean and are proud of their crafts, culture, and heritage. One day we took a trip to the rainforest. It was quite an adventure, especially walking over the suspension bridge made of cables that swung over a deep valley. Samora was afraid to look down. However, Mommy, Daddy, and I were brave and walked across with no problem. On our trip to the second town of Portsmouth, we met the mayor and his young son, Arby. Daddy called him Washway, but we call him Uncle W. It is an island tradition to call older friends of one's parents uncle or auntie. It is a mark of respect. Portsmouth was very nice. There was a big American medical school, Ross University, at the entrance to the town. Uncle Alec, a lawyer who attended school with Daddy, bought us Berkey's Pizza there. Uncle Kurt, who was visiting from Washington, D.C., has a home in Glenvilla, Portsmouth. He made a soup with crabs, vegetables, and dumplings after showing us around his village of Penville. Later we returned to Portsmouth and slept at a small cabin next to the Caribbean Sea with the gently crashing waves lulling us to sleep. We visited and slept at Daddy's boyhood home in Dinderland Lane and strolled through the botanic gardens. It was very pretty.
Okay, let's stop there for a moment, and I want to ask you about some of the things that you experienced. What was it like calling people who are not necessarily relatives of yours, auntie and uncle? I know my children had quite a laugh at that. Said, "Is this your sister? Is that your uncle? Is that your brother? Why are we calling them auntie and uncle?" Did that seem strange to you?
No, it wasn't strange at all. Because normally my parents call friends or relatives uncle and auntie in order of respect.
I see. Okay. What did you think about the food?
It was nice too. They had different foods I have never experienced before, such as this type of chicken called curry chicken. It has
Is
spicy.
that your favorite?
Yes, you could call that one of my favorites.
Okay. Okay, well, it was great talking to both of you, and congratulations on the book and having achieved such a milestone to have written a book on your own. And I'm sure you'll be going to other islands or back to Dominica, and we'll be writing more about Dominica as you learn more about Dominica, right?
Yeah.
In our next segment, we will talk with Samora and Makonan's dad, Gabriel Christian, about a totally different topic, and he will be talking also about Dominica, but something a little more historical. That's up next in our next segment of CaribNation.
To all those who give birth to, homes to, or just give thought to people adopted as infants, thanks for considering adoption.
Hello, welcome back to CaribNation. I'm Derrice Deane. In this segment, we will be talking with the father of those two wonderful children you just saw. His name is Gabriel Christian. He's written a book titled Death by Fire. He's co-written the book Death by Fire along with Irving Andre. And he will tell us some more about what this death by fire was and this deep, dark secret that is not so much of a secret in Dominica. But it depicts some of the turmoil that the Caribbean was undergoing in a particular period. Thank you so much for joining us, Christian, and welcome again to CaribNation.
Thank you very much, Doris. It's a great delight to be here.
Thank you. This is an interesting book. As I opened it, the first thing I saw was the date, and that struck me because I was in Guyana when Guyana had the race riots, and I saw Georgetown on fire on February the 16th, 1963.
Amazing.
Exactly 1 week before.
In fact, I think Sparrow may have written a song when BG burned down.
Burned down, yes. So this was very poignant for me, and I found as I went through it a number of social issues, I suppose I can use as one general word, which you addressed.
Yes,
we came from a colonial controlled mentality, so to speak, and a lot of that has remained. And in many cases, I don't think that a lot has been done to remove it totally. As Atherton Martin said, and as you quoted in one of his sections, until, it's like anything else, until we either forgive or deal with an issue head on, it will gnaw away at us.
That's right. We can't be citizens of the United States of amnesia, because one has to have. If you look at civilizations that have prospered, there are civilizations that are rooted in a knowledge of self and a knowledge of their culture, knowledge of their heritage. And anytime you have a people who are not rooted in that, they're defeated even before they start. And people ask myself and my friend George Andre where we find the time to do history. we say that I remark about what a very wise gentleman said to me one evening, a gentleman by the name of George Fraser, who has Guyanese roots, that the cemetery is the richest piece of real estate. That's where you have the books never written, the arts never created, the sculptures never sculpted. And so, you know, he wanted to make sure that when he did get to the cemetery, he was a bag of empty bones. He wanted to give everything now.
You've given all that you could give. Yes.
Right. So we wrote this book, Judge Andrew and I, and of course he's been my partner of years. We are going on maybe a close to 30+ year relationship from the student movement for independence in Dominica to 1992 when we did the first book, which you interviewed me about. And I cannot but remark, and my beautiful wife, of course, has made all of this possible, that we had these 2 children, my 2 children, who, when we first met, of course, I had none. I had none, and you know, we talked about In Search of Eden, our first book.
Right.
But they represent the continuity, and we sought to raise them in a home where we respected Caribbean culture.
Right.
And I say Caribbean culture because while we're Dominican, we've always been Pan-Caribbean.
Of course.
We believe in one Caribbean. I was born in 61. In 62, Jamaica pulled out. And Dr. Williams said 1 from 10 leaves 0. And at that same time, you know, we'd had a revolution in Cuba. We had the death of the Federation. And as you mentioned, the difficulties in Guyana. As a matter of fact, I relate some of that in the book because a few years before the fire in Dominica, Arthur Schlesinger, who just passed away recently, the noted American historian who served in the Kennedy White House, and Adlai Stevenson, who ran against Eisenhower, had come to Dominica on a sabbatical after the very difficult campaign that they'd lost. So Dominica, like so much of the Caribbean, has always been at this confluence of ideas and of cultures from Europe, Africa, Asia. And one of the most important things of Caribbean culture, as with Brazil, is the role that the African component played in the culture. And that is best exemplified in the carnival. As in Trinidad, as in Brazil, every year we have carnival. And on February 25th, 1963, in one of the most dramatic events in Dominican history, maybe Caribbean history, an explosion took place in the band, and 3 promising young men died. On that evening, the oldest brother of a renowned Dominican, Arthur Mate, his brother Eddie Mate died as a result of that explosion. The 2 others, Eric Shillingford and George James, were flown by BWIA to Mona, Jamaica, at the relatively new university hospital, which was then in operation. And they fought for their lives. But Eric Shillingford succumbed on March 2nd, and George James died on March 8th. But I need to tell you that Eddie Mate was a very renowned Dominican. His father served with my father in the British Army. He was the band leader for the Jewels, then the Swinging Teens, which became the Swinging Stars, which almost 50 years later is still in business. It's the oldest band in Dominican history. George James was the musical accompaniment to Sparrow whenever he toured. He was the band leader of GJ Orchestra, which was one of the most well-known bands in the Eastern Caribbean in those days. They traveled the Eastern Caribbean. And Eric Shillingford was the most unbelievable Dominican. He was the first person of African descent, we believe, to graduate with a degree of mechanical engineering from Luton, England, General Motors Institute, Luton, England, where he had gone in '55. The first Dominican in history to return with a degree in mechanical engineering. He was the agent for General Motors, International Harvester, and the Vauxhall Car and Truck Company. And he was also the first person to bring automated baking to Dominica. He had an automated bakery with 70 employees, 6 vans, everybody attired in white, and would deliver bread to your home. And he had depots around the city. So he had gone to England, but unlike many Dominicans at that time, who could not return for lack of financial means, he returned with all the ideas that he did been able to absorb. Why was that? Well, he was the illegitimate child of a planter, Hesketh Shillingford, who had a child with a black woman. And because the child was so smart, he invested in him. And so Eric, while though not born of the distinguished Shillingford family as in a normal marital, had gone on to distinguish himself at high school, had gone to college, and had come back and was moving. President of the Young JCs, president of the Carnival Improvement Committee, married the Carnival Queen of 1962 in November of '62, and just 4 months later perished.
Death by fire.
In that fire. Because it is believed he was moving shaking up the old economic structure, and that there were those in the elite who felt threatened by his sort of insurgent economic success.
And he wasn't one of the accepted social groups, so to speak.
That's
which
correct.
Was one of the things that we
Yes.
we still have to deal with in the Caribbean.
He had the name, but he didn't have the
Didn't
color.
have the
You know, Dominica, like Jamaica, like Guyana, like Trinidad, we're all countries that have been held hostage to history of class and color. And, you know, you may find in almost every island, you know, the people who are lighter complected generally have more property because they are the progeny or the offspring
or
of
get
the
better
plantocracy,
jobs, etc. Yeah.
and so on. And that has changed in many ways.
Yeah.
We now have a middle class that's of African descent, and we have much more democratic societies. We have better societies, but it didn't come without struggle.
Yeah.
And Death by Fire, the book, really speaks to an event which reflected the tension between the forward movement of the societies in the Caribbean and those who would seek to hold it
To
back.
hold on, yeah. And we still, and as you, in some cases, we still have that. Today, we still have people going back from the diaspora who are not looked on kindly by those who are trying to hold on to the old way of doing things there. But I also felt in reading the book that there was this problem of appreciating our culture, the lack of appreciation for our culture, and what a struggle that has been and still is, and where that is leading us when you look at the next generation. And I want to skip forward and talk about some of the lessons. You wrote about the lessons learned.
Eric Shillingford, George James, and Eddie Martin on that fateful day were dressed in a spectacular costume which only exists in Dominica and maybe one other place in the world, that's maybe in Ghana. It was brought to the New World by the Africans, but has dissipated in mostly all the other islands. I believe there's a little bit of it in maybe Trinidad and a little bit in Bahamas. It's called a sensei costume. It comes from the Twi language of sensei, which is a feathery or very fluffy bird.
Right.
It is usually made of crocus bag that's shredded out, or sisal rope that's shredded out and glistening in the sun where it's sisal rope. But they were dressed in the best sensei costume that day. That had been dying out in contrast to what was coming up from the Trinidad influence of sequins and imported ostrich feathers and the other glitter, which may be colorful but lacking in substance, in the actual cultural substance.
Right.
So he had gone to England and he'd missed that. So when he came back to Dominica, he was trying to recover the old culture of carnival. Now, mind you, carnival today is seen as a tourist event, you know, color and frivolity. But carnival in the old historical context of Trinidad and Dominica was actually an attempt by the African population
Slaves,
to really
yeah.
revolt against the
Exactly.
structure of oppression,
oppression.
that kept them down. So in Dominica, all through the 1900s, there were riots at carnival time, where the people having these few days to enjoy themselves would lead uprisings. And in Trinidad, you had the 1893 riot, you had the 1893 riot in Dominica as well. You had the banning of carnival on certain occasions in Trinidad, as you had in Dominica. In Brazil, the samba was banned for quite a long time because it evoked resistance. So carnival was really a battle of maneuver. And so what we see in Death by Fire is an attempt to really capture the essence of carnival, the pride, the cultural heritage, as opposed to the sort of superficiality that comes where people think it's simply rum and fun in the sun.
Having fun, yeah.
Yeah.
We're running out of time as usual. We never have enough time to talk about all of these things.
Yes.
But I do want to say that I do hope that there are more people who get the message. I remember being in Barbados when Barbados tried to revive crop over for the same reason. They had a meaning to crop over that they wanted to make sure to hold on to. And it took a while to be accepted because, again, the classes felt the difference in the classes. The upper class felt that it was something only the lower class would participate in. And so the message I would like to get out, which I'm sure you meant to get out of the book as well, is the importance of valuing our culture and making sure that we sustain it because only then will the next generation understand who they are, where they came from, and try to allay some of these the undercurrent of problems that we still have coming out of the Caribbean.
Absolutely. Drug use, violence,
Right.
and gang misconduct.
And self-hate.
Self-hate.
Yeah.
All of those things, in fact, can be dealt with where we come together in one communal festival. That's what Carnival is.
Yeah,
And we can have that communal festival be one where we engage in worthwhile endeavor. For instance, Carnival Cruise Lines. You know, they took the name before we did something. We
That's
could have
right,
done it.
exactly.
Now, if we're going to do it, we're going to have to call it Masquerade Cruise Lines because someone else is taking Carnival. So let's not have someone else take Carnival away from us.
Yeah.
Let's use it. Let's profit by it. But more importantly, let's engage in the self-discovery that is at its root.
Yes, and I do feel that that is something that we can pass on to the next generation and hold on to that. I'm sure that I do think this is a very interesting book. The whole concept of when you look at a death by fire, you don't realize how much depth there is to it. And, because initially you think, well, this person died, it was an important person who died. But this is still a secret in some ways. You still haven't actually found the answer to who did this.
Scotland Yard was
why.
involved. Scotland Yard was involved. Commander Slater from Trinidad. You know, it was a big thing, and there was a commission of inquiry report. The commission of inquiry report is at the back of the book. It's a fascinating piece of
Very fascinating.
historical investigatory work by Judge Andre and myself. And you know, my father had just come back from Trinidad, where he was being trained to run the fire service in Marigot at the new airport, and he came on the scene and met Mr. Martin. You know, immersed in all the blood and everything else. And he'd seen him an hour or two before at the fire station, where he'd come by and had played the guitar. He'd taken the guitar from a fire officer and said, listen, I'm going to play a song for you, and you'll hold that song for a long time. And he played the song in French that went, Salomon Houle, si you monu monane sala, si you monu monane sala, nane sala, si denye nani nu. What that means is, roll, Solomon, roll. If we're going to die, we're going to die this year. This year will be your final year.
Wow.
Very, 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 very chilling.
Wow.
Almost premonition of his death. But, you know, that's the kind of book it is. It's a fascinating piece of work.
Very interesting. Thank you very much again. The book is Death by Fire by Irving Andre and Gabriel Christian. Thanks again for watching us on Carib Nation. Until next time, I'm Derrice Deane.